Hello. Today I'm going to make a short video that's going to talk about gluing blocks of floral foam together in preparation for making a subtractive carving. The reason that I've asked you to use these particular types of blocks, this particular brand of material, is because it comes in 6 of these pieces, which really gives you a lot of options in terms of how you assemble them, right? So I can put them together like this and I can make a certain shape, or I can put them together like this and I can make a completely different shape, right? I could even put them together this way and have another solid form to carve. So by selecting this particular brand and this particular version of the brand, you really get a lot of options in terms of how you want to arrange these to create a solid block of foam from which you can carve your material. All right, so before we can make a solid block of foam, I want to talk a little bit about concepts of gluing in general. There's a lot to know about gluing. I mean, it seems ridiculously obvious. You put the glue on, you stick the two together, happy day, you've glued it together. But it's a little more involved than that. One of the things that's nice about these blocks is that they have these perfect surfaces to marry, and that's an important concept with gluing. Whether it be wood or something like this that's a synthetic material, what you need is a very perfectly mated surface with no gaps. And you can see that there are no gaps in here, that this is a really nice surface to join. So that's going to be the first thing to think about. The other thing that you need to think about as you start to glue something together is, what kind of material is it? In this case, it's styrofoam. So there are particular glues out there that are made specifically for certain materials. And I'm sure there is a very specific type of glue made just to glue styrofoam together, but I'm not going to worry too much about that today, because I know that any kind of carpenter's glue or yellow glue, you can see how this has kind of got a yellow cast to it, any kind of carpenter's glue will work for this situation. There are other glues that you could consider, I suppose. Plain Elmer's glue is a possibility, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of Elmer's glue because it creates kind of this rubbery seam. So if I glue 2 pieces together and I go to carve it, I've got this piece of glue that's going to stick up and be kind of rubbery, and I'm going to have to deal with that. This glue will dry hard, so that rubbery surface is gone, and now it's replaced with kind of a hard surface, which you can carve and sand a lot easier. So I would recommend this. There are other kinds of glues out there. You might think, oh, I'll glue it together with rubber cement. All right, rubber cement's solvent-based, and you may find, and I don't know this to be true, but you may find that rubber cement dissolves this foam. You might think, well, hot melt glue it together. Hot melt glue is a really bad idea for a couple of reasons. One, the heat from the glue is going to melt the foam and create big cavities and negative spaces. And also, trying to carve through hot melt glue is going to be really problematic as well. So I've used carpenter's glue before, yellow glue before, with good success. So that's what I'm going to recommend. All right, now, when you have decided how your chunk of blocks are going to go together to create whatever shape you're going to need to make your carving, once you've made that decision, you have to kind of develop a plan about sequencing, for example. So if I wanted to glue all 3 of these blocks side by side, it would be real easy for me to paint glue in there and arrange them the way I want them and set some weight on there and go have lunch. I'm done, right? But if I'm going to glue them together in a different way, like this, I have to come up with a plan. Which joint am I going to glue first would be the question that I would ask myself. And then I would also make sure that I glued these up so they were lined up perfectly. If I glued them a little bit irregularly, say I wasn't careful and I glued them up like that, and then I came back after lunch and I tried to glue this together, you can see I've got a gap there. You can see I've got a problem, right? So I have to think a little bit ahead about this. So I'm going to glue this together like this, and then I'm going to glue this. I'm going to attach this one later, so I have a piece of foam that's that form. Now, so I'm going to do this later. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this part now. All right, so another thing about glue is that you have to get it over the entirety of both surfaces. You can't just squirt, you know, write your girlfriend's name on here with a drizzle of glue and slap the two together and call it good. So I'm going to apply the glue with a paintbrush today. Another thing that you probably ought to know is this foam is not porous. If these were 2 blocks of wood, I'd need to work really quickly, and I would need to put a good coat on here, and I would need to put a good coat on here. And as I were applying those coats, the glue would be absorbing into the wood, and I might have to go over the first one with a second time. But with this kind of material, it's not going to absorb the glue, so you don't have to rush. Also, with this kind of material, because it's not going to absorb the glue, you're really going to want to use as little glue as you can get away with. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to put the glue down here kind of in a loose way, which I'll show you here in a second. Well, you can see it already. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush, and I'm going to move it around till I have an absolutely even coat over the whole surface. Now, this isn't rocket science, but it is something that you have to sort of craft pretty carefully, right? I don't want an excess because, again, this material is not porous. So it's not going to absorb any. I've got one side finished. You can see the glue's on there. Do the same thing to this side. Be careful with your brush. One of the reasons that I selected this material is because it is ridiculously easy to carve. You can literally abrade it with your finger. And consequently, if I'm too aggressive with my paintbrush, or my bristles on my paintbrush are too stiff, I can literally damage the surface. And if I damage the surface, then I kick up a bunch of pieces of foam that are going to make it more difficult to marry these surfaces together perfectly. Okay, so now I've got these 2 surfaces glued. You can see that I've very carefully covered the entire surface. I've let no bit of the surface uncovered. And then I'm going to push them together, and I'm going to work them together for a minute to really ensure that I have a nice uniform tight bond. Then I'm going to stand them up, and I'm going to clamp them. Now, clamping them is not really what I'm going to do. I don't have clamps. I don't have access to clamps, although there are some clamps in the shop, but this foam is so soft that if you attempted to clamp it, you would crush it. Now, a couple of thoughts. If you're going to glue another material across here, like this, for example, you're going to want to make sure that you have a really accurate alignment of these 2 blocks. Again, if one of them's misaligned, you're going to have trouble later getting that to stick together. So I'm going to, if I'm going to glue this together like so, I'm going to make sure that my blocks are properly aligned. Now, I don't have a clamp, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little weight on top of this. That weight could be anything. Be careful though, if you set something that's got like a hard edge like this can on there and it's very heavy, it's liable to crush. So I want something that's going to sit on here nice and flat. I just happen to have a brick. But if I didn't have a brick, I could easily use a textbook. And I assume since you guys are all college students that you're familiar with concepts of textbooks. In any event, be careful, because if my surface isn't perfectly level and I put a weight on it, it'd be very easy for gravity to cause that to slide like that. And you would go to lunch and come back and your blocks would be glued this way and it would make you say bad words. So to avoid that, make absolutely sure that once your block is weighted, that you're going to make sure that these are perfectly aligned. All right, and that's really all there is to it. You know, I would let this dry. I would let this dry a good long time, maybe even overnight. Now, normally with wood glue, you can get away with, you know, unclamping something in maybe an hour or a couple of hours if there's no tension on it. But because this foam is not porous, it does not have the ability to draw that moisture out of the glue. So you're going to have to wait for it to dry, and that's going to take probably overnight. And then tomorrow when I come back, I can glue this other block in place to complete my form, and then I'll be ready to carve. All right, good luck with this process. I can find the off button.